We're going to tell them we're going to do the opposite of a Bill O'Reilly show.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you, that's always on when I'm in the gym. 30 seconds. Always on.
What time is it?
20 seconds.
Oh, let me know.
Yep. He's saying we'll cue you in just a moment.
10, 5.
Hello, this is Freethought Forum. I'm Joe Barnhart. I want to welcome you. We're sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
And I'm John Clark, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people who are committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
And we hope, whatever your views are, that you'll be with us and have a discussion, because nobody should be alone. And we're going to talk about Paul the Humanist. Now, this may become as a difficult topic for us, but we want to try to see if we can make sense of it.
Yeah. But first, we want to tell you just a little bit about the sponsors of our show. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a meetup at Barley's down the Old City from about 5:30 on. Just look for the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. Or you can just ask the hostess at the front. Everybody knows us. We've been there for a bit. Just come by for some pleasant conversation. Please don't preach, proselytize, all that stuff. We
just talk with us.
Just talk. Yeah, just nice, good talk.
And we'll give you our website. Look for it if you would, and some details, so we can communicate times and location. Now let's get on to.
I do have a couple. Yeah, I do have a couple news. Oh, we left the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Almost forgot there. Several regular monthly meetings, first and third Sunday mornings of the month, lectures, lively roundtable type discussion. Second Sunday, Skeptical Book Club, and fourth Sunday, looks like get together and reflections meeting, potluck in someone's home, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, later on as Joe said, later on in the show, we'll give you some times and locations for that, and we'll move on to news, which we don't have a lot of. I do want to mention that, just like any organization, sometimes it's those of us, I think you called it, in the high school stage of atheism, right? Like to point out how blunders occur to, how like a liberal will point out blunders occurring to conservative parties, and it's this us-them mentality. Just like when, that stuff happens to everybody because humans are involved.
But we ought to try to avoid scorn of other people and contempt.
Right.
Because people who differ are still human beings.
Right. And just like it happens there, it happens within our own organizations. One such is Secular Coalition for America. America has been given some bad press over the firing of former executive director Edwina Rogers. We don't have actual information on that, just that turns out that allegations against her were at least haven't been proven regarding some missing money and whatnot. It's rather unfortunate. Yeah, it just turns out that I preferred Hemant Mithai, if you guys know him. He's from the Friendly Atheist website, and I liked his take on it, which was, the truth is, I don't know why she was fired. It doesn't seem to be because of the controversy that's surrounding it. It's probably due to the same reason anyone gets fired. They weren't working out with the organization. But anyways, just we'll try to keep you posted on that. I like to bring it up because we bring it about other organizations. It'd be nice to throw it out there, and if the shoe fits, wear it, kind of thing.
We're all human and all flawed.
Exactly, and
to be human is to be flawed.
That's right, and
that's why we need community and need each other, and we want to talk about the human side of whether you're an atheist or a naturalist or a theist, and there are all kinds of theists. You got many kinds of denominations, and I wanted to point out that all believers are unbelievers in the sense, and I want to make sure only what I mean by that.
Right.
You can't believe everything. So you have to make choices. And so you are skeptical of some things. In fact, I have 2 granddaughters, and I'm trying to teach them to be very skeptical. Just because a young man promises something or says something doesn't mean that you have to take it all that seriously. And a young woman, just because she says something, you have to weigh what people say. And so thinking includes skepticism and doubt. Believing includes skepticism and doubt.
Right.
And that's just part of getting along. And we like our kids to be very skeptical and at the same time very trustful, but not trustful blindly. Otherwise, they'll marry poorly.
Yeah.
And then most parents and grandparents don't want that to happen.
Let's just recap last week's show slightly, because we're going to try to continue the theme.
Some of it, yes.
And the theme, by the way, if you're looking down at the screen there, I also want to remind this is a call-in show, and I also want to let you know that today we're handling the calls live. So when you call in, you'll be live immediately. You try not to abuse that, and we'll try to handle it the best we can. I just want just throwing that out there. But as you can see, the topic is Paul the Humanist, and last week we were talking more of the beginnings of religious ideas, not necessarily from a creation point of view within a religion as God spoke, but how did people integrate beliefs about the world into their lives, and how did that?
Yeah, and I think religion, one approach. In fact, there's a book out. And it gives 100 definitions of religion.
Right.
Virgilius Firm is a philosopher who correlated. Let me pose this because I think it might be useful. That's all. Religion is our way of coming to terms with our finitude, or if you want another word, our vulnerability.
All right, now finitude.
Okay, that means we're limited in our thinking.
Got it.
We all feel our own ignorance.
And in the case we're talking pre-science, pre-natural philosophy.
Yeah.
This is a very early investigation.
And this kind of ignorance continues today because we all know what it feels like not to know. But
right.
In fact, the more you know, the more ignorant you feel. You know areas now that you didn't know anything.
Yeah, I remember knowing everything. I think I was 13 or 14. And since then, the more you know,
you get more ignorant.
Yeah, it's an eye opener. And by the way, if you're 13 or 14 and watching right now, you do know everything. It's cool. But what?
Now, when you suffer finitude, we suffer it intellectually. We also suffer it physically.
Right.
And we feel it. I mean, and people die. We see people die. We know we get our arms hurt.
Right.
So we suffer our vulnerability physically. Emotionally, we suffer our vulnerability and face it. And morally, sometimes we have choices. We just don't know. We want to do what's right. But sometimes you got 2 rights, but you can't do both of them.
Well, speaking of rights, we talked about empathy a little bit. And of course, a lot of our viewers are going to know immediately what we mean by that. But it's common to hear if you don't have God, you can't have. In fact, I heard it 2 weeks ago at the gym from a guy who I've done pre-nursing with this guy, and we know each other well enough. He's like he prefaced the comment with, because I'm wearing an atheist shirt. I know you're a really good person, but I don't understand how you can be a good person and not have that sort of.
His preacher probably preached that if you don't believe in a God, you don't have any morals.
Right.
And he believes
well,
that.
My immediate answer to him was the empathy portion. I go straight to it now, and I didn't take it in a bad or good way. I just looked at it as, that sounds like a really honest thing to say. And if you care for somebody, isn't that something?
Well, I know people who think of Methodists as just beneath them.
Right.
Or Baptists or Catholics, and this, I think, is a trait human beings have. Yeah. We tend to divide up and look down on each other. Remember the old, I think it was Alvin York's father said, people in the valley look down upon people in the mountains.
Yeah. That's true. But fortunately, in this scenario, we knew each other well enough that there was no, there wasn't a lot of stepping on each other's toes or any physical violence. It was a gym, but we got it. And we had a very short and productive conversation about it. Just I went with the empathy route, and then I kind of threw in there, well, I'm a cultural Christian. That's where I grew up, and so some of my first introduction. I don't remember if it was empathy or not, but either way, it taught me things, and part of it was the Christian teachings that I've kept with me now, and part of it wasn't.
Well, what you're saying is you got enough sense to learn from your background.
Right.
You don't buy everything of your background because that's part of what thinking is, but you also have enough sense when you learn something good, you keep it.
Yeah, and I reject what I don't.
Yeah,
care
all of us.
Well, yeah, I reject the stuff that didn't make sense.
I just got through talking to my former Sunday school teacher. She's 95 now. I'm very grateful to her because she taught me a lot of morals when I was a kid and also taught me empathy. Now, my mother was not very religious, but she too taught me incredible empathy. She had an amazing ability to take the side of people who were down and out in the neighborhood.
Right, and just to draw back to last week, we also mentioned that empathy occurs not just in humans, but in other species, and the empathy that we have, you are born with empathy to a degree, and you can also be taught empathy in a rational way. If you are someone who lacks empathy, I'm kind of in the mode. I'm taking a psychology class right now, so I'm in that mode of thinking, but. So there's variations on it, but we mentioned that we thought, and this seems to be about right with people who study ancient culture, that these early religious ideas or right and wrong came from this, and that would have certainly been entangled with religious ideas. I don't know what they were.
Almost all cultures have to develop empathy.
Right.
And that's basically what the golden rule is.
Right.
And the golden rule didn't start with some...
Oh, we've got a call. I'm going to go ahead and just jump in straight here.
Go right ahead.
Hello, caller. You're live on the air, so can we just get a name or a nickname for you?
Yeah, this is Dave.
Hey, Dave.
Hi, Bill. I've been listening to y'all for quite a while. I was wanting to ask you a question because I'm not up to date on it. I brought the comment last week to you guys about Joel Osteen's theft of $660-something thousand.
Oh, right.
Have you heard any more about that? It's just shut plumb up.
You know what? I haven't.
So
it's kind of off the radar. But I think after we got off the phone, I don't know if you heard that little bit. The revelation was just how much was going on that people didn't know about. So those of you at home who don't know, there was some money missing.
And I'm not even saying that it's a fact. Somebody called in and said it, but I don't know that it's even a fact.
Right. Well, I happen to have read up on it a little bit. Yeah. And the surprising was, this is someone who's got a large ministry, and it was an awareness that look at the power that they had. And then it just kind of faded off of the radar. So, no, I haven't heard anything more about that, Dave.
I just figured, fellas, that they just don't want people to know they have that kind of money laying around there.
Well,
you got a good point.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say, but I see your point.
Yeah, if I had that much money.
Yeah.
That's
hey, they're not going to. I don't think, fellas, that they're going to miss that. I don't think they're going to miss it all. If there was, it'd be hunting who got it, wouldn't it?
Right. That's a good point, is that it was a fraction of what would have even mattered. I mean, you certainly don't want a large sum of money missing, but...
Well, thank you for calling in on that, because I'm with him. It's just stunning to have people have that kind of money lying around. Yeah. But I don't know the details, so I can't really make...
Yeah, so I can't really... All we'd end up doing is speculating.
Getting to our topic now.
Right.
What we're trying to do here is say that all cultures have to develop something like the golden rule. And that's empathy and the golden rule are just two ways of saying the same thing.
Right.
And it takes a lot of work to do that, to get inside another person's point of view enough to look at it from his point of view.
So,
and that's work.
Right. And so to start today's topic in the context now, we have Paul. We have an area of the world that is settled. I mean, there's settled ideas on these things, and now it looks like change is sweeping through. And perhaps you could help me with this now.
Okay, Paul was born apparently in a Hebrew tradition. We don't know a lot of his background except what he says, that he grew up a Pharisee, although there is one Jewish scholar who challenges that, but we won't get into that. He grew up, we think, in Tarsus, in a world that was pretty much dominated by the Roman Empire. Now, before that, you had the Greek Empire, and that's why they were speaking Greek at that time.
Right.
And the Bible that Paul read was translated into Greek. It's called the Septuagint because the legend was that 70 good scholars translated it. Now, the important thing to remember is in what we today call Israel, you had a lot of parties, plus just a few miles away, you had the Essenes, that's the Dead Sea Scroll people, we think.
Right.
And you had the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and you had the Zealots. And you had then up there in Galilee, you had the poor peasant farmers, and that's presumably where Jesus did a lot of his preaching, and with John the Baptist. And if you read the Epistle of James, you get a lot of sympathy for the poor. Now, if James was the brother of Jesus, then that's understandable, because in the teachings of Jesus, you find a lot of sympathy and empathy for the poor, and they were being robbed heavily. Those poor farmers were being taxed unmercifully.
Right, and that would have been, you're not living in that, and you would certainly have to empathize, have to see it from their point of view. And we see this now when you've got class system that's competing.
It was a severe class system.
You can really us them, and it's sad when it comes to that.
Well, I know some people in this country now who simply can't find decent work.
Well, right. This is particularly difficult.
These are people who are willing to work hard, but it's very difficult for them to find good work. I talk to people in different countries on the telephone because these corporations are hiring people abroad.
Oh, right.
So we can understand what was going on in Palestine at that time, or what was in the state of Israel. They were being dominated by a foreign government, taxing them heavily, and it's not difficult for us to understand that some of the preachers believed in an apocalyptic inbreak from heaven. The kingdom of God was going to come and transform immediately. And you read the 13th chapter of the Gospel of Mark, and that may be one of those apocalyptic passages, depending on who reads it.
Right.
But they were expecting some supernatural inbreak. And some interpreters of the Gospels think that Jesus believed he was going to be the leader. He had 12 disciples representing the 12 tribes of Israel going to set up the new kingdom.
Yeah. I've mentioned Bart Ehrman on the show before, and I believe his stance was that Jesus is an apocalyptic prophet. And in that sense, in that context,
And to see the sadness of it from that point of view, here's the preachers and his disciples thinking that there's going to be this supernatural inbreak and a transformation, and he ends up being crucified like a common criminal as an insurrectionist.
So one of the things we mentioned last week was the act of sacrifice, and how was that Paul as well? Yeah, Paul saw a need to change that. And this is an idea where you've got a religious structure for society, that is, a framework that society operates by.
And the priesthood.
And, the priesthood, could you tell us a little bit about?
Priesthood, basically in control. These are the Sadducees and the priesthood in league somewhat with the Roman government.
Isn't that interesting that, about, 1,000 and, many, many years later, right before Martin Luther made his complaints. This is a very similar situation
There are
in some ways.
Some similarities, yeah.
And you needed it's a paradigm shift, right? It's a mindset, and so Paul was trying to deal with this. Now like I said, we were talking about sacrifice and saying, Jesus, this was the last one necessary, and changed it. Are there some other ways?
Well, John the Baptist, if you read it, there are various ways you can read the Gospels, and you can always find different interpretations. But one way is he really thought there was a supernatural kingdom coming in.
Right.
And it didn't happen. And now Paul comes in with a completely different interpretation.
Right.
His interpretation is that this crucifixion, in which was just humiliation for these disciples, was really the sacrifice and the atonement to end all atonements. Now notice the ingenious of this. Here you have this whole money-making sacrificial system with all of these animals being killed, and all the tax money, and these poor farmers having to help supply all of this, and the priests in charge. And only through all of this do you get your sins covered.
Yeah.
You got to have sacrifices and blood sacrifices.
That's as dirty as it gets. I mean, throughout history, that's as dirty as it gets. Yeah.
And then here Paul comes in with a view that all these animal sacrifices are no longer necessary. And he says there's one named Jesus, just Joshua, who died. Now, from Paul's point of view, if the rulers, now, and I think he means these supernatural rulers that run the universe, in other words, he's a dualist.
Right.
If they had known who he was, he says in one of the Corinthian letters, they wouldn't have crucified him, you see. It's almost like the Trojan horse story.
So I have to kind of, it's kind of a joke, but not really. In a way, Jesus did save a lot of, did save some trouble, but it wasn't intentional. It was an act, and then later on Paul looked back at it and kind of put these pieces together.
Now what you could say for a historical Jesus, now it depends on how you read him. There's so many different versions. But if you take the Sermon on the Mount, which emphasizes not violence, but kindness, understanding, just ordinary getting along with people, that was a message that human beings needed. In other words, you can't have Paul just coming in and saying, no, there's one sacrifice, and eliminates all that sacrificial system and eliminates the priesthood. And that's a big power group, eliminates it. Then you still have to have people learning how to live and love and be, little phrase, be ye kind one to another.
Yeah, and this is the great part where a practical method jumps in and people, wow, this really works. And then you forget all the silliness.
Exactly.
You forget a lot of the silliness.
Here's where the women have been denied their impact by the writers of the Bible.
Right.
It's the women, basically, who've been teaching the golden rule long before Moses, long before Jesus. And I mentioned this on the program. A mother will say to one of her children who's mistreating another, Johnny, how would you like to be treated that way?
Right, the guy's out doing, well, traditionally and historically in most settings, the man is out doing work. He's not
raising the children.
Not close to the child. And that makes sense. And for myself, when I donate to charities and whatnot, one of my primary concerns is, does it benefit women and children, education, in that regard? Now, I'm not always thinking of America. I'm not always thinking of the first world, but in the third world, if you had to fix a lot of problems, and if I'm wrong about this, let me know. But for example, I mean, even safe sex. Who's going to teach that in Africa right now?
Right.
The men are out working. The women are going to, and they need you educate and liberate women.
Exactly.
And it pretty much, that is the only trickle down that I know of that works.
Exactly.
And so for me,
sex to be real marriage has to be mutual.
Yeah.
Not rape.
Now that might work quite different.
We know that in some cultures in the past, women did not have that much say over their bodies.
Yeah.
And now we're learning that that women are human beings and persons. I mean, you should have known that.
Right. Right.
In fact, you have in the book of Genesis, male and female.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just male.
Well, heck, I mean, even
Created
scientific terms, human.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it had only been recently that I really got that awareness to where I could see the differences in the sex. Especially if you learn a different language, or at least you start playing around with it. You're learning a language that handles masculinity and femininity slightly different than we do, and it's an eye opener, and that is how we deal with it. And it is unfortunate. Yeah.
In Genesis, in which they're writing from their point of view, God created male and female, both in the image of God. You see, not saying, well, there's the male and then the female. Now you do have two versions of this, because in the Hebrew tradition, you had in my opinion, you had a great diversity of opinion. One version is you have God, then there's Christ, and there's male, and then there's women. You kind of had a hierarchy.
Right.
But that's not there in the first part of Genesis, it seems to me, because that writer understood without the women, we're not even here.
Yeah.
You know? The nurturing part of life is a creative building part of life. Without it, I mean, I remember, I think I mentioned on the program a couple of times, I want to mention it again. This man I met when I was about 30 on the plane, and he was saying, I'm a self-made man.
Right.
And I said, I'd like to see your navel. Wanted to remind me he had a mother.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was an umbilical cord.
Well,
and,
yeah, there was.
And
he said, "What the heck's wrong with you?" And I told him what I was. And we ended up having a good conversation.
Well, we as a country had this conversation. I want to say, I can't remember if it was. I think it was 2012, and it was President Obama restating. You know, who made you? Who do we owe what we know? And you, everyone else. I can never remember this reference, but we stand on the shoulders of giants. That came before us.
Yes.
Whether they were.
Sir Isaac Newton mentioned.
Right. Yeah. There we are. I think I heard it from Neil deGrasse Tyson.
And that's good too.
And yeah. I have to mention, final episode of Cosmos was this past Sunday. Do you watch Cosmos?
I did. Yeah.
It's really good. Well, the new one.
Oh, we've got a new one. No, I haven't. No, tell me.
Well, you're 3 months behind. I think.
This is the one that Carl Sagan.
Yes.
Now,
so this is still.
I have to say, I have a picture of myself, and Sagan and I were in a program together. We were shaking hands, and he said to me, I thought it was kind of ironic. He said, "Keep up the good work." This is Carl Sagan.
Yeah.
And I should be saying to him, "Keep up the good work." And
exactly.
That was
right.
a great program.
We got a call. I think I'm going to go ahead
go.
and jump to it right before we do our halftime show. Hello, caller. You're live on the air. This is Freethought Forum. Could we have a name or nickname for you?
Caller is okay.
Oh, hello, caller.
Talk to
Hadn't heard you in a couple weeks, caller.
Yeah, you haven't made any mistakes.
I don't know about that, but
haven't had time.
Yeah. What's on your mind?
No, I was trying to be funny right there.
Yeah.
Joe was talking about the relationship of man and woman. I actually had two questions. And one was that in Genesis, God created Adam, and then he went all around with Adam to the different animals, and Adam, I think, named them at that time. But among the animals, Adam could not find a helpmeet. And therefore, God went, oh, man, I forgot to create a female.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm wondering is, doesn't this suggest that had Adam found a monkey or something, that might have been his helpmeet?
Oh, was there something that could have possibly replaced according to the story and the thinking of the characters, was there something that could have replaced the female, you mean?
Right. It almost seems like the female is being minimized in that story. And of course, it is a story, but I just never understood what the purpose of that part might be, why Adam would be going around
looking at the animals for a companion in life.
Yeah, that's I kind of see what you mean there. I never really thought about it so much, but I do see what you mean.
Well, more than likely, Joe would have an answer.
Yeah, Joe. That's just...
Well, most scholars think that you have two accounts, and it divides in the second chapter, verse 4 in the middle. You have what's called the E document, the Elohim document, and the J document, and that's Yahweh. Now that the Germans don't have a, they have to have a J.
Right. They have
and
that,
so,
yeah.
and that's where you get Jehovah adding on. That's a long story. But anyhow, you got, and what you're talking about is the J document, and that's more anthropomorphic than the E document. The J document just gives a story. All it is the writer trying to imagine what it was like if you just had a man alone. You see, and
Okay.
so we don't want to put too much on any more than we do some of the Greek stories. The
So
Greeks
you're looking at this as more as a metaphor, or
Exactly.
parable, or allegory, or a made-up story.
Yeah.
Unlike our Baptist friends or some of our friends that might say this actually happened.
Well, I learned
Right.
this metaphorical, let's be fair to the Baptists, I learned this metaphorical interpretation from a Baptist theologian.
Uh-huh.
See, not all Baptists are alike any more than all atheists are alike.
You're right, and when I said that, I felt really bad. I really did. I
That
felt
means
bad.
you got a conscience.
Yeah.
No,
I
I
like
wish I'd
that.
said Mormons or something, because I don't
Okay.
like them as much.
Joe here's a strong supporter of the Baptist, right? You, because a lot of them have got some good ideas.
Well, I that was part of my heritage. If I had grown up
Yeah.
in another heritage that did me
Oh,
well,
yeah,
I'd be very.
Yeah.
I believe in gratitude.
Yeah.
Also, it appears as though the woman is being minimized. What I'm getting
I think
at
you're
here
right.
is the minimization of women by the Bible. And the other one was that God created the large animals, the smaller, Adam, the larger animals, smaller. Anyway, on down until the last thing he created was Eve. And if you were arguing the opposite, then you would say that women, females were actually, or human females were actually God's highest creation, since it was an order of ascension.
Yeah.
I'll give you my wife is 110 pounds, but she's a good intellect. She said that this story means that God experimented, and he started with animals and males, and finally he got it right with a female.
And made it was. This was the last iteration,
and
perfect in every way.
So maybe that's what the writer was getting at. You never know.
Very good, very good.
Thank
I
you
like
for
your
calling,
input
yeah.
on that. The other thing I was wanting to ask about was what you mentioned with. You happened to mention the Golden Rule and about how it actually came before Moses.
Uh-huh.
And so at times I've asked myself, with prophets in the Bible, prophets would bring messages, and these messages would be, oh, do this or do that, or God's going to smite you, or the message might be, here's the laws, like for Moses when he's a prophet.
Uh-huh.
And for the life of me, I can't think of one new thing that Jesus taught. Everybody's talking about the teachings of Jesus, and as far as I'm concerned, I just can't see anything except believe in me or you're going to burn in hell. And and as I look at the different parables and all, that message is repeated over and over and over again, and it's the only new thing that Jesus had to say. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, there are a number of scholars who would say that the teachings of Jesus are basically in the Hebrew Bible. Love your neighbor certainly is in the Hebrew Bible. And
Confucius did the same thing.
Exactly.
He was 500 years before.
Exactly. The Buddhist tradition has it. The Hindu tradition has it. The Jewish tradition.
Right.
American natives had it. In other words, what we're saying, I think maybe you're saying, if you don't have something like this, a culture is not going to survive. You have to have mutual support. You have to have understanding and empathy. Otherwise, the culture is going to eat itself to death,
Right.
eat each other up.
Okay. What you seem to be saying is that I'm right.
Yes.
That saying and that information existed before Jesus.
Right. I mean.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, what I'm asking is, anything did Jesus say anything, teach anything that was new?
What ideas, if any, did Jesus were original with Jesus? What do you think?
What I would say is, first of all, we don't know. It looks as if everything he said in terms of moral teaching had already been said.
Okay.
What's really important is he said the right things, many of them at the right place at the right time, when it was very dangerous to do so.
In contrast to the environment around him. He was kind of shedding light on some of the ideas that were being overlooked. Mm-hmm. Really.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
A good point.
Yeah.
In other words, go ahead.
Again.
But I think, go ahead.
As I understand, hell did not exist before Jesus, at least in the general population. So as far as I'm concerned, and I've listened to what you just said, but as far as I'm concerned, the new thing he taught was to the Jews, believe in me or you're going to go to hell.
Okay, let's deal with that. The concept of hell did develop before the first century, both among the Jews and among the Greeks and the Romans. That doesn't mean that every Jew believed it, or every Greek, or every Roman, but the idea and the concept certainly was out there. You can find it in Greek literature, Roman literature, and Hebrew literature.
Now, I can't find it in Hebrew except for Sheol.
Well, you have to go to the book of Daniel, but that's late. That's usually dated about 164 to 167 BC. That's pretty late. But in the early part of the Hebrew tradition, I think you're right. You won't find the doctrine of eternal damnation the way you find in the New Testament. I think you're right.
So as far as I know, I'm still right. Because the only thing Jesus taught was, believe in me or you're going to go to hell.
Well, that did not originate with Jesus, the idea of going to hell.
Oh, okay.
Now, we also have the problem among biblical scholars is it is very difficult to really know what the historical Jesus did do and did say. I mean, it is just, that's called the Q document. Right. When you put Matthew and Luke together, and they seemingly say the same, or sometimes just the same word.
We're interested in when they're saying the same stuff.
Yeah. Then you say, well, the Q document means the source. This is a German word for source. And so we don't know where all of these sayings come from.
I do know that it's somewhere in the Gospels. There will be gnashing of teeth and so forth.
Now, I'm with you.
If I'm a Christian and I'm following the Gospels as being, whether I'm mistaken or not, as being Matthew, being an eyewitness to Jesus' life, then I would have to conclude that that's exactly what Jesus is saying, because I think a lot of our faithful friends out there do not take this in this cue and metaphorical and everything language that you use.
You're right.
As God said it happened. That's the end of the story.
And that is very unfortunate. You're right about that. They take it as a
I brought
doctrine.
I brought with me one little passage. Let me read to you and see what you think about it.
Okay.
You with me?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm still watching the screen.
Okay. Now
You're
this
dressed
is
nice. Joe is not.
Okay. What was that?
Just go on.
Okay. Now, this is by Robert Bruce Mullen. He's apparently a Christian, and he says, in the past century alone, our century, this Jesus he's writing about has been seen as a moral prophet. That's point number one. Social revolutionary, philosopher, cynic, teacher of wisdom. The word cynic there doesn't mean what it normally means. That's a special kind of philosophical group. And in countless other ways. Indeed, this writer goes on to say, in the long history of Christianity, people have tended to read into this Jesus the hopes and fears of their ages.
I like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article that I presented at I think it was the Society of Biblical Literature or the American Academy of Religion in the Southwest. I can't remember which one. The title of the paper is Jesus a Rorschach Test? What do you think?
Oh, I see where you got the idea from, because caller, you come in and you bring up a good point about Jesus, but we were talking a moment ago about more of the benefits to mankind, and you came up with and rightly so, a criticism of Jesus' teaching.
Well, what I keep getting at is that Joe here was just mentioning, of all, this flowery accolades of Jesus' teaching.
That's true.
Where the fact of the matter is, I don't think any of that is in the least bit accurate, and certainly not deserving, because there isn't that. Like
now, this is where we might have some contention. Are you saying that?
No, I think he's got a good point.
No, I do too. But what I'm saying is,
as a matter of fact, I would contend that anybody who can nail down who the historical Jesus is dealing in the realm of conjecture. Now, what I want to say, these are good scholars, and my hat's off to them. It's exceedingly difficult to nail this. Now, what I think might be the case.
I'm just going on the scripture. I'm just going on reading the Bible. Is there anything in there that Jesus said that was of any value whatsoever in his metaphors and his parables, anything else? Everybody says the golden rule is attributed to him. It's not.
Well, hang on. You're right about that. We're just bringing it up as in he did perpetuate a good idea with the golden rule.
Okay, here's what I'm trying to get at. Is you have some things that Jesus said, using my ethics, and apparently yours too, are incredibly decent and good.
Yeah.
Some of it is downright malicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of it is. As a matter of fact, I found that there was only one group who Jesus did not criticize.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he criticized the Pharisees, sin, said that some fellow who taught a child not to believe in him had a rock tie around his neck and throw him with a big ass stone in the water and drown.
Well, all they was saying, anybody who does harm to children should have millstones put around their neck and drown. Okay.
A big ass.
Now you use the word metaphor.
Yeah.
Take it seriously.
Yeah. Really quickly, if you'll stay on the line with us, caller, we'll go ahead and do our mid-program break a little late.
Well, I'm sure that somebody else wants to call.
Oh, well, yeah, okay.
No, these are good points, though.
These are good, yeah. This is right up what we're talking about.
The only group that escaped any criticism whatsoever from Jesus, he criticized everyone else except the Romans.
Okay.
He never said it was a bad thing about a Roman or the Romans.
Are you telling me, are you criticizing Jesus?
No. What I'm saying is, isn't it kind of odd that the only person he did not criticize was the Romans?
Okay.
Or any Roman. Everybody else he had things to say about, from his own apostles to Mary Magdalene to his own mother. Sin, Pharisees, but not the Romans.
You have a point. He did seem to be rather harsh toward his mother on one occasion, but we don't have enough of the context to really know for sure what was going on there. That's the problem in reading the Gospels.
Well, that's a shame, because I was wanting to call up here, and I was wanting to get Jesus all figured out, and then I wouldn't have to watch this show anymore. Now I'm going to have to set my clock at 5 o'clock every Tuesday and tune in just like the rest of the time.
I'm glad we confused you, so you'll tune in some more.
Okay, listen, let me get off, because maybe some Christian would like to call in and let us know what Jesus taught.
All right, thank you, caller.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, do we want to go ahead and run it's a little late, but we'll run the mid-program break there and thank our sponsors real quick. And then we'll get some more calls in, hopefully.
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
All right, welcome back. If you're just tuning in, you saw our mid-program break, and I'm going to try to get this next call on and keep us going.
Yes, go right ahead, please.
All right, caller, could I have the name or nickname for you?
Yes, my name is Michael. How are you doing today?
Oh, Michael, welcome
back. Well, Michael, being that I didn't drop you a second ago, I guess I'm doing pretty good.
Well, it must be divine. We have faith now.
Yeah, Michael, you told me something really interesting while we were on the break. You said that you were a former minister, right?
Correct.
Okay, and what did you have for us today?
Well, I mean, like I said, we just moved to this area, and I was listening to content. It's very interesting, and I was actually glad to see something like this up here. But y'all were talking about the validity of Jesus and the interaction between, the Scripture and what may be real for us today. And my question was this. There is a group of us that also might believe that the whole basis of the modern Scripture is based off of older texts, not off the Bible, but all the way back to Egyptian, from Mithras to different dying and rising saviors. Because, Jesus is just the latest one on the block. You've had dying and rising saviors all the way back to Egypt, such as Mithras is written on the side of the Egyptian walls.
Right.
He had 12 disciples, God of the beer, the Son of God died for the sins of the world, rose on the third day. And a lot of this is based off of solar gods. That's why they had the equinox and matter of fact, under Constantine, with the Council of Nicaea, it was at that point they started tearing down a lot of these temples and rebuilding the Christian temples on top of these buildings. So my question to you guys is, do you really believe that there was a true Jesus that walked? Because if you take out the Bible from the scenario, there's very little backing to show that a Jesus actually existed during that time.
Okay, if you want to read a writer, and you may have already, who has defended there was no Jesus, anything like in the New Testament, the author is G.A. Wells.
Okay.
He's written about 6 books, if my memory is right, on this issue. Now, I think after having read all of these books of his, I would conclude there were probably lots of people around at that time named Jesus, because it's just the name Joshua.
Right.
And I'm sure some of them were quoting passages and ideas from the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. And so here's my latest conjecture, see what you think. That what's called the sayings of Jesus are really a lot of collective sayings put into one person's name or mouth. Very much like the book of Proverbs.
Right.
As a minister, you know that all those Proverbs are attributed to Solomon.
Right.
But most scholars know that they're just a collection of sayings put under one heading.
Yeah.
And not all the Psalms were written by David.
Right.
I think our last caller may have been hinting at that as well.
I think the last caller had a very good point.
So in that sense, regarding the existence of
we
Jesus,
don't know that much about it, a historical Jesus anything like what's in the New Testament.
Right, and I would totally agree, because even 80% of the scripture that's given for us that we attribute to Christ, you can find within Buddhism. I mean, 80% of those statements are right in Buddhism.
Yeah.
I think Paul, I'll have to look this up again. He may mention the name Jesus at least 40 some odd times. I'll have to look again. But
right.
You don't get, what's surprising to me is the sparsity of details about the historical Jesus and all of the letters of the Apostle Paul, and including the general epistles. And that's in Hebrews. They refer to the theological Jesus, but the details of this ordinary man who had to wake up every morning and use the bathroom. You see, God became man and he had constipation now and then. Let's face reality. You know?
A very good point.
Well, in other words, orthodoxy said he's fully human.
Yeah.
So take it seriously. That means if he's fully human, he didn't know everything, because if he did know everything, he wouldn't be fully human.
Right.
And he wouldn't have athlete's feet.
That's
all I'm trying to say is, if he really was a human being, he couldn't be omniscient. You can't.
Absolutely correct.
Can't have it both ways.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
And furthermore, I would say, even if Jesus became omniscient, when?
Yeah.
I want to know precisely. Was he when he was 30 at 4:30 in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's not even a lot of scripture that supports the fact that he was God. I mean, there's not.
That's a really good
just
point.
Not there.
There's not that much. No.
You know, if you don't mind, I want to interject like a non-scholarly approach to this. Well, maybe a rational one.
Good.
When I think of historical figures, I think of Abraham Lincoln. And when you look back at what we know about Abraham Lincoln, what do we really know? And I've had some history professors go through a similar argument, even with John F. Kennedy, even with and these are very recent figures. And the historical approach doesn't say anything, honestly, in a lot of cases, doesn't say anything about whether a person exists or not. We just, this is what we know, this is what we attribute, and so I don't think you meant the question in the same way. But when people ask this question, I wonder why they're asking whether or not he existed or not. Now, if you're a believer, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, under the Council of Nicaea, first of all, the books that we have before they were manipulated or whatever, I mean, from a Christian aspect, we would say they were manipulated.
Right.
But, you know, when the Christian, the context in which the Council of Nicaea happened, and I'm sure you guys know all about this, I mean, the book of Adam and Eve was one of the most carried book back then. There were so many books that were supposedly attributed to the Christian faith back then that they just eliminated right then at the Council of Nicaea in 300 A.D.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
315, 300. Right. That's a good point. What we call the New Testament canon was a selection process to weed out and eliminate a lot of other Christian writings and Hebrew writings.
Any of the I wouldn't say any of those could have survived. I mean, I guess a lot of them could have survived, but they didn't, and this is the one that did. And
Martin Luther did not like the Epistle of James at all. He said it's a right strawy epistle. It means you can chew on it and you don't get much out of it.
Yeah.
But in other words, what our caller is saying is, it took human beings meeting in committees and disagreeing with each other and compromising on what they're going to call the books that belong in the Bible.
Right.
And they eliminated others.
And that's more like what we were talking about at the show. You see the title Atheism, Paul the Humanist. You know, we're trying to talk about a framework for society, and things had to change to a degree. And
but getting back to Paul,
for good or bad, and this is where I would contend with the last caller, was that let's take the good ideas that survived. I don't care if Jesus thought them up in the first place or not. If they're good ideas, keep them. If they're bad ideas, trash them.
One of the advantages of the stories, I mean, children, and Dostoevsky, who was a Christian and a great novelist, But he pointed out that children, I think all of us, learn a lot when our values are put into stories with people.
Yes.
And I think the story of the woman taken in adultery, for example, in the Gospel of John, that story is very moving because here's a woman who's caught in adultery and they're about to stone her to death because that's what the scriptures.
I love this example.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they're supposed. The scriptures are you're supposed to stone her to death.
Yeah.
But Jesus in the story writes on the ground and says, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone."
Yeah.
Now, maybe he was writing on the ground the names of the women these guys have been.
Yeah, we
with.
don't actually. Yeah.
We don't know.
Probably.
You know, Bart Ehrman used this once to.
Oh, Bart, yeah.
Yeah, he used this once to say Jesus was in an interesting situation because there was a law that said that she had to be stoned.
That was the law.
And so what he was saying, and I wish I could source it right now for you, but he said that Jesus came up with a really clever idea to get them not to stone her, even though it was the law. And that, I don't know if it's true or not, but that's...
Now that passage, by the way, is not in the better manuscripts of the Gospel of John. It sounds more like Luke.
Oh.
And of course, as you might expect, I don't think Calvin really liked that story anyhow.
No, yeah.
I mean, after all, he executed a guy who was a Unitarian.
Yeah.
Well, then everybody could have got along, if it went that route, I think.
Well, listen, Michael, I want to thank you for calling in. We're down the last hair of the show.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Oh, yeah, great.
Thank you again.
Tune in, and also we got to meet up downtown tonight at Barley's if you got the time or in the future.
Where's it at?
Are you from out of town?
We're moving here. We're from Florida. We're moving in here right now.
It's Barley's. It's tap room and pizzeria. Barley's tap room and pizzeria. There's folks there now, I guarantee it. And then we're gonna be there in a shade, but
downtown.
It's our local. The Atheist Society in Knoxville meets up there for that one. Yeah.
Well, cool deal. Yeah. Well, it's great talking to y'all, and keep up the good work.
Thank you much, sir.
Welcome to East Tennessee.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. All right. Well, we got just a couple more minutes, anyways. That was a really fabulous call, and brings up some good points. And keep the good ideas, and if we have to, we'll invent some new good ideas if we have to.
That's what Paul did.
Exactly, necessity being the mother.
Now, getting back to Paul, here he comes up with this one solution. And then you could say, well, in the Hebrew tradition, you still have human sacrifice. See, Jesus is human sacrifice. Now, that's my complaint against this view, is if there's a God who is good and decent, what in the world does he want with human sacrifice?
Yeah.
In fact, Paul says in the book of Acts 17:25, God needs nothing.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then...
this is also a time where civilizations, river valley systems are everywhere. We've got lots of civilizations. What are we doing sacrificing this? We need those. There's lots of ideas creeping up, and there needs to be a rationalization, and we got to push past this old idea.
What we can do when we talk about the origin of religion again, sometimes figure out how these sacrifice ideas came into existence in the first place.
Right, that would have been good on last week's show.
We can do a whole program on that.
Well, it's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been a Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am John Clark.
And I have, let's see, we go 5 o'clock every Tuesday from 5 to 6. I hope you can join us, whether you're a theist or an atheist or an agnostic. We welcome you.
We just want an open discussion, and you can also view this live stream, ctvknox.org. We'd like to thank all of our viewers. We'd like to thank Sam, and then we'd like to thank our callers. I got Dave, caller, and Michael. I think
Michael
that was
called before, I think, and I'm real glad.
Yeah.
I want to thank Lee. He's not here today, but he usually works with us to help us
Yeah.
make this
The
possible.
nuns, those who identify with no religion, are the fastest growing religious group in America. We just want to remind you that you are not alone.
Okay, thank you very much.
That was good.
Yeah. I missed this I was about to answer it, but the call just hung up. I was going to just... I wanted to get to him. Oh well.
Yeah, that worked out fine. No